Hello, students. It's Professor Berger, and I'm coming to you today with a review for Essay 1. The purpose of this video lecture today is to go over some of the highlights and requirements of your first essay assignment. We'll also discuss the required outline, the proofreading checklist, right, for proofreading your essay before submitting the final copy. And we'll talk a little bit about the rubric. So that is the purpose of today's lecture. Discuss the essay requirements and just sort of a good general discussion to touch upon some of the more important highlights and key aspects. You will of course need to read the entire assignment sheet description word for word, which is in the module. You also need to look over the entire outline and template for organizing and structuring your essay, and then make sure of course that you read the rubric, all of the rubric as well. This again just touches upon the highlights, but I'll give you also some tips and pointers, some things that I think are very helpful as you sit down and start thinking about writing and drafting your essay. So let's go ahead and start at the top of the review, and let's start with the writing prompt, right? What is the whole purpose of your writing assignment? So remember that your number one job is to make sure that you thoroughly answer the writing prompt, that you answer it at length in detail, and you provide a well-developed, thoughtful response to the writing prompt that demonstrates your critical thinking and your own original ideas, your own analysis of the text Antigone by Sophocles. Okay, so our writing prompt is to write an original and objective character-based or character-focused literary analysis of either Antigone or Creon. In short, write a character analysis of one of the main characters from the play, either Antigone or Creon. Okay, now technically this is a kind of literary analysis. This is a kind of writing or academic prompt. You're reading and analyzing literature, but it's a very specific kind of literary analysis. Instead of giving you a general topic or a general theme, I want you to look at one of the two main characters and just really break down that character and, talk about what makes that character tick. Who is that character, right? What are the character's values, beliefs, attitudes, motivations, fears, strengths, weaknesses? Both Antigone and Creon have flaws, but they both have strengths as well. And they have their own unique worldview and culture and attitudes and values. Even though, yes, they're both technically Greek and from the same city-state Thebes, so they had the same general culture, right? And they are from the same family, so they have a shared family history. Remember that Creon is Antigone's uncle. They are of different generations, and they do have different values, or they have maybe the similar values but prioritize them differently, right? Antigone says the moral law is above the human law, and Creon says that the state and human law is of the utmost importance. So these are the kinds of topics, these are the kinds of points that you want to explore in your character analysis. Don't just provide sort of a general profile, this is who Antigone is, she's from Thebes, this is her family, da 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 da. You don't want a really sort of general oversimplistic. You still want to dig in and get into some of the deeper issues related to that character. What is the character really motivated by? I will tell you that both of these characters are dynamic. Antigone and Creon, while I'm not suggesting that they change or that there are any significant changes in their characters throughout the play, definitely Creon sort of has this revelation at the very end of the play. It is, of course, too late, but he does finally takes some advice, right? And he tries to undo what he has done. Alas, it is too late. Antigone has some interesting thoughts at the end of the play before she goes to her death, when she talks about not becoming a wife or a mother or living out her life. She suddenly has sort of this nostalgia for just living and getting married and having a family, but none of that's going to happen now. When earlier in the play, Antigone was just running toward death. She was like, it's a noble death, it's a glorious death to die for what you believe in. But it didn't feel so noble or glorious necessarily at the very, when I say the very end, I mean her goodbye speech to Thebes. So these are the kind of more interesting issues that you want to explore in your character analysis. Don't try to say everything, okay? That's too much. Choose 3 or 4 points that are, in your opinion, more significant related to that character and really unpack those points in detail, okay, in a detailed analysis of the character. You'll be much more successful if you choose a handful of points that you think are most important and a half dozen examples from the play instead of trying to say everything and use lots of examples. Okay, as a general rule, that's what you want to do. So there's our writing prompt. Remember to see the list of pre-writing questions on the assignment sheet. These questions that are below the writing prompt on the assignment sheet, you don't have to answer all of those questions in your essay. They're really there to help you do some brainstorming and just thinking about your character as you're drafting, just to help guide you in your writing. Avoid being one-sided in your analysis. Remain objective, analytical, and well-rounded. No character in this tragedy is perfect or completely admirable. Both Antigone and Creon have weaknesses and blind spots. Okay, so this is a really important writing tip. Don't be one-sided in your analysis. Antigone is not all great. Creon is obviously not all great, but he's also not all bad, right? So Antigone isn't perfect. Creon isn't evil. Be well-rounded and balanced in your analysis, okay? So don't depict your character as as either completely evil or as completely perfect, all right? Be balanced. Remember to try and see this character from a 360, from all angles, okay? Avoid being too harsh or judgmental in your analysis. Again, remain objective. So I'm being repetitive with the purpose. Try to remain objective, okay? Analytical. This is an academic paper. It's not an op-ed piece or an opinion piece, so avoid use of first person. I believe, I think, I feel. Try to avoid using personal pronouns or speaking directly to the audience. You want to remain sort of in that third person neutral objective tone and voice. And a lot of times the trick is if you have a statement, for example, that starts with, I think Antigone is a hero, and you're like, oh, I can't use first person in my essay, just take the pronoun out, the first couple words, I think, and make your statement, just make a direct statement. Antigone is a hero. A lot of times you can just remove the pronoun, the first couple words, and have a direct statement, basically making your argument without using the first person, okay? And yes, an argument is your opinion or reading of the text. Absolutely, I do understand that. But we're trying to be more objective and analytical in our discussion and our analysis and not terribly personal and emotional. And so you can do that by simply avoiding first person and the use of pronouns. Or personal pronouns, excuse me. It is helpful to try and be sympathetic. Remember, these characters, both Antigone and Creon, are only human. Yes, they're characters in a play, in fiction, but they're also representative of their character types. But Sophocles developed them. Remember, no Greek hero can be too good or too perfect, and no human is perfect. So try to have a little sympathy for both of these characters. I think that when we demonstrate a little bit of sympathy and try to sort of understand a character from multiple points of view, we have a better understanding, right? As a general rule, students who have a little bit of sympathy for the characters tend to have a better understanding or can see multiple sides a little more easily. This is just something I've noticed over the years in teaching, is that when you're sort of very sort of rigid and unsympathetic, like this character is stupid and bad, or this character is good, there's nothing wrong, it just doesn't it doesn't work as well. Okay. Try to go a little deeper in your analysis. Think about the big ideas and questions in this play. There are a lot of themes and topics that you could focus on in a literary analysis, but this is not necessarily a thematic paper. It's a character analysis. But as you're developing your character analysis, remember some of those big ideas. For example, family conflict. I mean, this is at its heart a family conflict. I've said this from the very beginning. So when Creon and Haman are talking, it's king and prince, it's ruler and citizen, but it's also father and son. And when Antigone and Ismene are talking, it's, yes, two citizens, two women, right? Women of Thebes, but it's two sisters, okay? So, and again, when Antigone and Creon face off, it's uncle and niece. It's king and subject. It's citizen and ruler or leader. And so there are these layers. This is also about judgment and leadership, not just judgment on the part of Creon, but judgment on the part of Antigone. Sorry, I just needed to adjust the screen there. So it moved a little bit on you. But judgment all around, right? What kind of judgment does Creon exhibit? He exhibits better judgment toward the end of the play, but very poor judgment in the beginning. And he does try to be a good leader in the beginning. We at least have that sense or that feeling in that initial speech when he's speaking to Thebes, to the elders, to the senators, and he's talking about what kind of ruler he wants to be. It sounds very balanced and sincere and genuine, but he doesn't always exhibit good judgment, better judgment toward the end, but it's too late. And how about Antigone? Is her judgment always really good? Does she listen to advice as well? We know that Creon's headstrong and he ignores advice, but what about Antigone? Okay, so I would argue that both of them exhibit throughout the play varying degrees of judgment, and sometimes it's better than other times. Justice. This is certainly a play about justice and fairness and equality. What is just? Antigone certainly makes a very powerful argument for justice is burying both men, both of my brothers, Polynices and Eteocles, with full rights and customs, instead of viewing them as just soldiers and one who was loyal to his country and one who's a traitor. They were both men. They were both my brothers. They were both Theban citizens. They were both citizens of this city. And her argument is, they both deserve to be buried according to customs and rites and rituals of our culture. And she's also this is also tied to the religion that the Greeks have, which they believe that, there is such a thing as a moral justice and a moral law. You bury people according to rites and rituals and customs, okay? So this is tied to the afterlife. So she is definitely making an argument for justice. Creon is making an argument for justice too, right? He's saying, look, one brother was loyal to his country, the other one was fighting against his country and was coming back for control and power, and this was a civil war, and he was fighting his own countrymen. He was killing his own countrymen. That's not just, right? So they're both talking about this idea of justice, but coming at it in very different ways. And fairness. Again, Creon believes that it's not right or fair to bury a traitor, right, which is how he views Polynices. It's not right to bury that traitor with full rights. He'd betray his country. But Creon also is maybe motivated by fear, right? He doesn't want anyone to get any ideas. Creon wants to shore up his power and his political base. He doesn't want to make a good example of somebody who rebelled and was a traitor, right? He wants to also make an example of Eteocles, who was loyal. So there, there are layers again to Creon. He's making an argument for justice and fairness, but he's also motivated. He has a personal agenda. And, perhaps Antigone has a personal agenda too, right? She talks a lot in the beginning about the glory and honor of dying. And she seems to be racing toward death, okay? So think about those big ideas. Think about the authenticity of Antigone and Creon's claims and their motivation, the possible motivation behind those claims. But definitely they're both making an argument for justice and fairness. Antigone's definitely also making an argument for equality, treating both men equally in death. They are both deserving of burial rights. There's also this sense of equality and inequality in the play, right? Because Antigone is a woman and she doesn't see this as an obstacle. Okay, but Ismene says in the very beginning of the play, hey, we're just women. Who are we to go up against men? And this does not faze Antigone in the least. She feels equally empowered as a woman and as a citizen of Thebes, and sees herself certainly as an equal to Creon, okay, as a member of the royal family and as a citizen. And she sees herself as an equal to Creon when it comes to the moral law, which, remember, Antigone says the law of the gods is higher. It is above the law of Creon. Remember that great quote. And so she sees herself certainly as an equal in that way. And so what's really interesting about this idea is that, of course, the play was written around 460 BC by a man in a male-dominated society, in a society that definitely placed more value on men, and women did not enjoy the same rights under the law necessarily, or equal rights. And so remember that Sophocles wrote this play for an audience around 460 BC, an audience that was part of this male-dominated culture. And yet his hero, his heroine, of course, is Antigone. And she's a very sympathetic character. So this is really kind of interesting that we have a male author, somebody who is part of that status quo, the patriarchy, and yet he's definitely created a character who makes a very powerful argument for equality under the law. Wow, that's an entire paper. If somebody wanted to write a research paper on that topic at the end of the semester, you could. That would be a tremendous topic. Actually, all of these would be tremendous topics for your research paper at the end of the semester. Leadership, morality. Okay, what's moral, right? Again, do we uphold those who are traitors, right? Do we uphold the moral law, the law of the gods, a person's conscience over what's best for society? I mean, there are a lot of questions here, and these are hopefully what you're seeing, debates that we are still having to this day. And certainly Sophocles understood that. He understood human nature. He understood politics, he understood governance, he understood leadership, he understood this idea of justice and patriotism. Sophocles was aware of all these issues when he wrote Antigone, and Antigone was performed for the people, and so the plays were their entertainment, right? Plays were a big deal in Greek society and Greek culture, a really big deal. And so he's putting all of this out there for his society and his culture, right? in 460 BC, okay? Because these are issues that are relevant to Sophocles and his culture at that time. Literature oftentimes gives us a sort of a peek into the soul of a culture, right? Even though this is classical, ancient literature, right? A couple thousand years old, it's still incredibly relevant and still resonates with readers, which I think is amazing. But I think that's because Sophocles has a tremendous understanding of human nature and citizenship and leadership and governance and sort of that whole sort of universal conflict of the individual rights versus the collective. Okay, so many great things going on in this play, but all you need to do, remember, is one really well developed character analysis, Antigone or Creon, 3 or 4 points. Okay, so do your best. Make your best argument around 3 or 4 points. Don't try to say everything. Choose what you want to focus on. All right, so next up, required outline. There is a required way to organize your ideas and develop this paper. It's an academic paper, obviously, that goes without saying. So if this was a creative writing class, which I love and is wonderful, but it's not a creative writing class, so it's structured, right? Academic essays are structured. In creative writing, you have more freedom, more creative freedom, but because this is an academic class, I'm sorry, because it's a class about academic writing more specifically, there is a required structure. And so you need to follow that structure, and that outline is in the module. Yes, you need to have an introduction that introduces your topic, that identifies the text and the author, provides context. You need to have a clearly stated argument or thesis statement and a roadmap that tells the reader this is how all of this is going to be accomplished. Here are the 3 points or 4 points that are going to be addressed in the paper, right? Which is basically your roadmap. And then you have the body of your paper, which are the multiple sections or points in the body of your paper. And then you have a conclusion that wraps it all up. So make sure you go back and you really study that outline and understand it, and email me if you have any questions. It is also part of the rubric. Okay, and there is a way to organize your ideas in the body of the paper too. A clear, strong topic sentence, analysis, explanation, discussion, a couple of examples from the text, from the play as your evidence to support your argument. You follow that for every point or subtopic in the body of the paper, and then a concluding paragraph. Now, you are required to have roughly 750 words. If it's a little bit under 750, like it's 730, as long as you have a well-developed paper and meet all of the requirements, that's probably okay. If it's a little bit over 750, that's fine. 750 is around 3 pages roughly. Okay, do not think of this as the 5-paragraph essay. Remember the 5-paragraph essay? This is probably something you studied in high school, and it's not wrong. It's just how we teach writing in high school. You have, your first paragraph is an introduction, your second paragraph is your first point, your third paragraph is your second point, your fourth paragraph is your third point, and your fifth paragraph is your conclusion, right? That's the 5-paragraph theme paper, and most of us were taught it in high school. It's perfectly fine, but in college, don't think 5 paragraphs, I'm done. This is roughly 3 pages. So your body paragraphs, your points that are sandwiched between the intro and the conclusion are likely going to be multiple paragraphs. Don't think, my first point is just 1 paragraph. Think multiple paragraphs per point, and think, maybe in my first paragraph, I have a clear analytical explanation, and second paragraph, a couple of examples from the play to explain and support my analysis and my argument. I think that if you think along those lines, that will help you avoid that 5-paragraph mold. So again, yes, you have to follow this outline and organization. It provides all of the elements that you need in your essay from beginning to end. It's actually really helpful for developing your ideas. A lot of my students really look for these outlines. They use them, and it helps them draft their papers. So they'll just take a piece from the outline and say, I'm drafting my first point, and I'm going to follow the outline, and then I'm drafting my second point. I'll follow the outline. So it's actually a very helpful tool. The checklist. Okay, so you do have a proofreading checklist. It's not necessarily mandatory, but you should really be in the habit or get into the habit of proofreading all of your academic essays. I proofread everything for the most part before I send it out. Now, I do make mistakes. I do miss things. There are occasionally typos, but I really try to be in the habit of proofreading my emails, my texts, certainly all of my formal documents. I read and reread, and this is something that if you don't already do, you should really develop. It's really important when you're signing off on something, whether it's a report at work or a paper that you submit in college, that it's clean and free of significant grammatical errors. It's clear, it's thoughtful, and it's professional looking. You want it to be professional looking. Anything that you submit to a professor or any kind of document that you would submit to a supervisor or even a customer or a client, proofread, okay? Don't ever submit something that has careless, sloppy mistakes in it. That really does not reflect well, right? So here are a couple of tips. Leave time to proofread your draft. Read it out loud. Maybe ask someone else to help you review it, right, with you. A lot of times when we're reading our drafts out loud, we hear mistakes that we don't see, okay? So reading drafts out loud is very helpful. Find somebody you trust and ask them to read it out loud to you, or you read it out loud to them. This has been a really helpful proofreading tip for a lot of my students. Consider using the online virtual writing center if you want a little extra help. Use the proofreading checklist provided. It does walk you through many of the points that I look at in assessing your essay. So a lot of the points that are in the rubric, you also see in the proofreading checklist. Don't forget to use MLA style for formatting, the header, documentation, whether it's in-text citations or the works cited page. You do need to cite according to MLA style. So that is page number, and for a play, line numbers in parentheses for the in-text citations. Since you're only referencing one work, make sure you identify Antigone by Sophocles in the introduction, and the rest of your in-text citations, you don't have to put Sophocles in the parenthetical citation. You can put page number and line numbers, okay? And that will be sufficient. And then make sure you have a correctly formatted works cited page. That is the last page of your paper. There are modules on our Canvas course website with direct links to the Purdue OWL online writing lab, which provide examples on how to cite and document, as well as a sample paper, all in MLA style. So I will make sure to publish the Purdue, I shouldn't call it the Purdue OWL module, but it's a short module that provides links and tutorials, supplemental information on MLA citations and documentation, and a couple of the links take you directly to the Purdue OWL online writing lab, which is a fantastic site. It's wonderful, very reliable, a very good source anytime you have questions about formatting or documenting. A truly complete final copy has been proofread and is free of careless and sloppy mistakes. It's not done until you've proofread it and you've caught all of those careless mistakes and corrected them, okay? A final copy is clean, polished, and professional looking. So keep all of that in mind when you're proofreading your drafts. And then finally, the rubric. And I did give you the rubric at the beginning of the module. It's also attached to the assignment link for the final copy of Essay 1. You really, really need to look over that rubric. I will tell you again, I touched upon it in the introduction. There are 5 categories for assessing your writing. Okay, so I'm going to go over just the highlights again, but do go back and look at it yourself. I look at your argument or your thesis statement. I look at your content and your ideas, structure and organization, grammar or mechanics, writing style, and then MLA style and formatting. Those are the 5 categories. Now, MLA style is, I believe, roughly 10%, and grammar and mechanics, I think, is another 10. Structure and organization is, I think, a little more than 10%. Argument and content, that is at least 50% or half of your paper. So getting your argument and getting your ideas right, that's important. That's at least half the grade. And why? Because it's all about developing your own ideas about Antigone and your character. Okay, so you want to demonstrate your critical thinking in your writing, and that's your content and your ideas, and that goes back to your argument. So keep all of that in mind. In general, you're not assessed for perfection, but for effectiveness. And I can't stress this enough. Really, at the heart of the rubric and the assessment is how effective is your writing? How effectively do you make your argument? How effectively do you support your argument with examples, well-chosen examples from the play? How clear is your argument? Is it factually accurate? And what I mean by that is not that there's a right or wrong way to read or interpret Antigone. There are many different interpretations and readings, but when you are quoting or citing the play, make sure that it's an accurate reference to the play. Make sure that you get your specifics correct. There are some really careless things that I sometimes see in papers where it looks like maybe the student writer didn't really read the play. Maybe they don't have the author correct. Maybe they don't have some other sort of information correct about the play. And I'm talking about some pretty major stuff. So make sure that you are factually accurate in your discussion. But overall, I'm really looking for effective communication, all right? Clear, insightful, thoughtful, well-supported, good use of reason, logic, and evidence, okay? And all of that evidence should be examples from the play. Everything should go back to the play, go back to the text. There's no right or wrong way to read Antigone, but whatever your argument is, you should be able to support it with examples from the play, okay? It should all go back to the text. So again, you don't have to be an expert on Antigone. I really want to make it very clear that I'm not looking for you to be an expert on Greek tragedy or even an expert on Sophocles. I am looking to see that you really do know your character, though. If you write about Antigone, you really need to know Antigone. And if you write about Creon, you really do need to know Creon. That's, I won't say an expert, but you need to know your character very, very well. You're expected to know the play, not just the plot, but again, the big ideas that we've talked about. But you are expected to write about your character in detail. Know your character in detail. Okay? Be factually correct. We've talked about that. Nothing looks more unprofessional than to be factually sloppy. Be thoughtful, go deeper, avoid oversimplistic or discussing in broad brushstrokes. This is do not overgeneralize. Don't be very, very general, right? You need to pick 3 or 4 points and break them down, be analytical, be thoughtful, be specific. Again, be clear, be specific, be thoughtful. This is probably one of the most important tips I can give you. Be clear, be specific, be thoughtful. I think these are really the keys to effective writing and effective communication. Fully develop your ideas, provide examples from the play to support your analysis. Follow the assignment guidelines and requirements listed in the assignment sheet. Make sure you read over those. Review the rubric. Go through your draft with the rubric in hand. So compare your draft with the rubric. What grade would you give your draft if you turned it in without making any corrections? And then finally, points are earned. Points are earned. And I think this is a little different from writing papers in high school. Now, this is second semester English, so I think most of you are probably familiar with this concept. In college, professors and instructors, we tend to have a slightly different approach in that, the rubric breaks down the buckets of points that you earn. It's not necessarily that you wrote a paper, you submitted it, and you automatically have 100 points, and then, there's this checklist I go through to deduct from 100 per se. It's looking at your paper based on the merits and the quality and the final product, and through the lens of the rubric, how many points do you earn? I am available for students to meet with students in one-on-one conferences this week, today and tomorrow from 11 to 2. So please email me for a conference appointment. If you cannot meet during 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., please suggest another time. I will do my best to accommodate other times. And just so you know, conferences, at least student conferences, they are optional. I don't normally make them mandatory, but most students find student conferences very helpful. And what these are is an opportunity to meet with me one-on-one. That's why I call them student conferences or one-on-one appointments. And you have my undivided attention for roughly 10 to 15 minutes to ask me any questions about the course. Again, this is an option. If you don't feel like you need a one-on-one conference, you don't have time, it's okay. But if you would like to meet with me and have a phone call or a virtual meeting, like a FaceTime, then just shoot me an email and tell me, again, 10 or 15 minutes between the time of 11 to 2 when you'd like to meet. And if you can't meet from 11 to 2 p.m., then suggest another time. I'd be happy to meet with you. Okay, so that is our review for Essay 1. And I'm going to leave you on that note. Of course, always remember that I am available for questions. Really, feel free to shoot me an email anytime. I'm very happy to answer questions. All right, so take care, everybody, and good luck with writing your paper.